Hello, this is Dr. Sergey Shealy-Sorin. I'm here to represent and to also talk on behalf of my dad, Dr. Norm Shealy, who couldn't be here today, but he did have a couple of things he needed to do at the house. He's okay. And by the way, Dr. Pawluk, Dr. Norm Shealy is saying a huge hello. Um, I am pleased, I am honored for this program to introduce you, to bring you a man whom I truly consider one of my gurus. That's all I can say. This gentleman here goes by the name of Dr. Pawluk. Also, first name is Bill, if I'm not mistaken. And I know he's very modest, but he deserves much applaud. He deserves much accolades, and he's literally one of the founding fathers of the PEMF, or energy device movements and information. And he's one of the world's authorities on that, including many other things. But he's also one of the world's authorities on holism and has been practicing holism his whole life, as far as I could tell. And every time we talked, it's not very often, once in a blue moon, but those talks I treasure every second of it. And like I said, this wonderful man right here is not just a great doctor, but he is one of my personal guides and gurus. So I am honored. Thank you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I very much enjoy our interactions and our discussions. They're always free-ranging. So yes, I'm ready to go if you are. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. And if there's anything that you'd like to mention about yourself to the audience, I imagine pretty much, well, lots of people would know who you are, but I just want to make sure that we have some background just in case.
I have some slides about that.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So
So the hour is yours.
show. Slideshow. Okay, from the beginning. Here we go. Everybody see that okay?
Looks good to me. Yep.
All right. Well, again, I'm Dr. Bill Pawluk. And so this this presentation is going to be about functional medicine or integrative medicine and how electromagnetic field therapy sort of works into it. So it's a blueprint basically for using pulsed electromagnetic fields, or PEMFs. So we'll cover the value of PEMFs in functional medicine, the value of adding PEMFs to your care, your personal care, or to your care or the care you provide people as a practitioner, the better results people will tend to see with PEMF therapies that I've looked into and enjoyed and saw the results of myself over 30 years working with them now. The conditions that magnetic fields have been shown to manage, how they work, critical factors that determine effectiveness, how to choose a PEMF device, and the devices I recommend. And at the very end, there'll be a special bonus for those who attended this webinar. So who am I? To go back to the question you were asking before, introduce myself. Well, I'm a former family physician, and I've done holistic functional medicine for the last 15 to 18 years. I'm trained in acupuncture through a UCLA program for physicians. I have also training in functional medicine, nutrition, homeopathy, herbal medicines, energy medicine, healing, color therapy, sound therapy, hypnosis, and whatever else I decide to do. So I did conventional family medicine for years. I was a medical director for a group in New Jersey. And I've had several university positions, including Hopkins and Case Western Reserve. In 1985, this is how I got started on this journey with PEMF therapy. 1985, 2 patients almost died from ibuprofen for their pain management. So at that point, I said, this is crazy medicine. So I went ahead and did acupuncture training instead of, again, relying on essentially drugs and procedures. And I finished in 1990. And at that time, nobody really knew, or very few people knew about acupuncture. So I started looking for alternatives to using needles, and I started using magnets. I discovered that in the Orient, they were using magnets. And then around after that time, then I started doing the holistic medicine, the functional medicine in the Baltimore area. I co-hosted a holistic natural health radio show for about 10 years, and I was invited to the Oz show as a PEMF authority. So again, in terms of magnetic field therapy, I've been working with magnetic fields for about 30 years, the author of 3 books. One is called Magnetic Therapy in Eastern Europe, a review of 30 years of research. I worked with a doctor from the Czech Republic to produce that book. It's highly technical. It's really not a sort of a personal book. It's a very tough read for anybody. And then I did another follow-up book called Power Tools for Health, which has over 500 references. So this has more of the science. And then subsequent to that, because people were asking for more practical information, we published Supercharge Your Health with PEMF Therapy. I've done numerous radio, TV, print, summit interviews, book chapters, and so on. And I have two authoritative websites. One is called drpawluk.com, and then PEMF Training Academy. And we have several other websites that are for specific devices. So in 1990, let's go back a little bit. In 1990, there's no magnetic field therapy in North American society. There was none among practitioners, essentially. They may have been using lasers or ultrasound or other things, but not magnetic field therapy. But since then, there's increasing use among professionals. So that science is growing. Every clinical discipline, no matter what your specialty is, whether it's medicine, surgery, naturopathy, acupuncture, chiropractic, PT, psychosis, hypnosis, psychology and hypnosis. Some people might practice psychotically, but anyway, all disciplines have limitations. It takes time for every professional to learn the limitations of their training and their discipline. Typically, I found it takes about 5 to 8 years. Then the practitioners start to ask questions about how to go beyond the limitations and the limiting boundaries of their discipline and their peers, both their training, their peers, and also even licensing for many people. So, and I did the same thing, essentially. I found out that I did not have enough tools. Those patients with the GI bleeding from ibuprofen really laid the groundwork for my saying, okay, I need to leave the house of medicine behind. I could incorporate it, but I may have to leave it behind and do acupuncture. My peers would say to me, acupuncture, what's that? You're crazy. Why would you do that? Anyway, so the use of PEMFs is expanding rapidly. So magnetic field therapy basically is, to go into the discipline, is pulsed electromagnetic fields are used as an advanced, powerful, safe, integrative, and natural method of healing. And they rely on the body's own capability to heal itself. They're non-toxic, they're not invasive, they stimulate the body's own capacity for healing. PEMFs don't do anything by themselves. They rely on the body to be stimulated to do its own healing. They're reusable, they're natural. You could use them in the home setting or professional use. So more and more practitioners are using them in their settings. And that's not always the best setting for PEMF therapy, and home. And that's one of the things that I emphasize a lot more is the home setting. And they're very complementary to almost all other therapies. And they do, in fact, rely on other therapies to produce the most benefits. And there's a large body of biologic evidence. I have about 30,000 abstracts on the effects of PEMFs on biology. So what are the treatment benefits from PEMFs? There's significant benefits for people. They act in synergy with other therapies, as I mentioned. They work deep in the body. And that's one of the key aspects of magnetic field therapies. They work deep in the body, basically through the entire volume of the body. And they do direct tissue healing. So when I was learning acupuncture I discovered didn't do tissue healing, but magnetic field therapy does direct tissue healing. And as a result, it addresses stubborn problems much better. So you can superficially help symptoms by, say, taking ibuprofen or Tylenol, but that doesn't actually cure or help to heal or reverse the problem. So basically, PEMFs make nutrition, supplements, acupuncture, virtually everything else work better. And the most important thing is they stimulate the body's own natural healing potential. So in terms of functional or integrative medicine, it's an ideal area for the use of PEMFs, whether you're on the receiving end or on the end looking for that those kinds of therapies, or you're on the practitioner end. PEMFs are ideal for practitioners. Let me give you a case study. This is one of the things that kind of really one of the cases that really blew my mind and really solidified for me the value of PEMF therapy. So I had a 3-year-old girl whose father called me. She cut off the end of her thumb, just below the fingernail. I literally cut it off. And you can see here the suture marks. I had the surgeon reattach the thumb as like a Band-Aid to control the wound area. All right, so we had them sew it back on. And I said, there's no harm done. We'll do magnetic field therapy. There's no harm done if you reattach that piece. It'll at least keep it clean. And then hopefully magnetic field therapy will help to restore it. So July 12th, 2012, before magnetic field therapy. Black and blue, clearly purple, no blood supply because the blood supply was completely torn off. 3.5 weeks later, with magnetic field therapy, an hour and a half to 3 hours a day. She's developing a scab. You can see the tissues are integrating. She still has the suture marks, but it's not black and blue like it was throughout that whole area before. 6 weeks later, she got a little tuft of that scab, basically the scab or the scar. Look at the thumb. It's nice and pink. It's still swollen because it's still regenerating. Lost her fingernail, as you'd expect. Okay. At about 12 weeks, she's regrowing her nail. So this is astounding to me. And what that did for me is it really brought home the regenerative capacity of PEMF therapies. And in the younger population, like a 3-year-old, they heal much faster and much better than us older folks. So generally speaking, magnetic field therapy produces benefits over time. You have to keep doing the therapy for the healing processes to be engaged, the problem, essentially. So yellow is unchanged, blue is improved, and green is relieved. So here you don't get after a week of therapy, you don't get a whole lot of benefit. Right? As the treatment progresses over the 6 weeks, you can see that the unchanged group is very tiny. The improved group is significant, and the relieved group, people who are significantly relieved, has basically stabilized after about 3 or 4 weeks. But the improvement group continues to grow. And the study was done and stopped at about 6 weeks. But if you continue to do the study, you would see that the relief and the improvement all keep growing. So how does magnetic field therapy work? What are the different actions? And this is key. This slide is absolutely key to how magnetic fields work. It doesn't matter what the disease is. It doesn't matter what you're using it for. This is what the magnetic fields are doing in the body. And this is too long a list to go in, and most of this is covered in both of my books, Power Tools and Supercharge Your Health. But you can see it does a lot of things. Acupuncture, I mentioned before. It affects the adenosine receptor for inflammation, has anticoagulant effects, goes after bacteria and viruses and infections in the body, decreases swelling, increases ATP, helps cells restore themselves, nitric oxide, healing acceleration. I showed you with that little child. Nitric oxide. It affects the endocannabinoid system. That's what the system that basically we use to use CBD and marijuana and cannabis. It all works through that endocannabinoid system in the body. And the list goes on. So there's so many different things PEMFs do. And the thing about these actions, I don't dial it. You don't dial it. The body decides what it's going to do. So all these actions are then used in the healing process to deal with whatever problems you want to deal with. So regardless of the diagnosis. So in the Power Tools for Health book, I provide evidence on 50 different health conditions and how PEMFs have been shown through research to actually help those conditions. And again, it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. It's the mechanism of action that's really the key. So again, in 1990, there was no PEMFs in society, and something's happening here. So the principles of integrative medicine are that it has healing power. You want to heal the tissues. That's the primary goal, is to heal. Because if you don't heal, you don't solve the problem. You have to identify and treat the causes. First of all, do no harm. And the doctor becomes a teacher. You and the patient is a doctor to themselves as well. So it's not just the medical doctor or the practitioner that's the doctor. The patient is also their own doctor, and they're teaching themselves as well. And the treating the whole person is really critical. That's really important in terms of selecting PEMF therapies, because unfortunately, most people tend to say, well, I got a splinter in my finger. Well, you remove the splinter, then I'll be fine. But what if the body has a slow healing process? What if you're diabetic? What if you have a lot of other things going on in the body that delay the healing? Well, you have to treat the whole person in order to get the best results. So the ultimate goal of natural medicine is the optimization of health. Where there's insufficiency, we have to identify and address the insufficiency. You have to reverse the insufficiency. Once you have sufficiency, once you're basically back to, in quotes, normal, you're not done yet. You have to maintain that sufficiency against entropy, which is always acting. It's always there. So optimization then is you add continuing strategies to gain ground on entropy. You want to be ahead of entropy, preferably, and not behind it. Most of the time, we're behind it. So this is organization, and so that's not entropy. This is disorganization, and that's entropy. Aging basically is an entropic process. Things begin to fail and break down. They're not as functional as they were when you're at this age or when you're a child. Right? So aging is inevitable for almost everybody. How fast that happens depends on energy and maintaining the capacity to go against entropy. So one of the most important aspects of gaining ground on entropy is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So it's the most important goal is to keep up with the energy in a system. Keeping up with the energy in a system requires sufficient ATP. You can't have too much ATP, but you have to have sufficient ATP. And ATP is critically important because it's recycled continuously, back and forth between ADP and ATP. So PEMF therapy helps that recycling process. The energy used by human cells requires the hydrolysis, the breakdown of 100 to 150 moles of ATP a day, which is around 50 to 75 kilos a day. We replace essentially our body weight every day in ATP. Now, hydrolysis is critical because ATP by itself does nothing. It's a resource. It's an opportunity. You have to hydrolyze it. You have to strip off one of the phosphates to release the energy. So magnetic field therapy does that. It hydrolyzes ATP and then regenerates it from ATP. So humans will typically use up their body weight of ATP over a day. Each equivalent of ATP is recycled 500 to 750 times in a single day. It's constantly being used up and recycled. So we have to maintain it. So PEMFs produce, maintain, and restore ATP, keeping the cycle going optimally. So one study found that even 20 minutes of PEMF therapy increases ATP by an average of 100% and maximally up to 600%. So key effects of PEMFs on ATP. And then we can get into a discussion about whole body versus local. Now, to build a house, you need bricks and mortar. You need the workers to do the work. You need plans. You need to know what you're doing. You know where you're going. You need to have tools, resources to be able to put all this work together. And then you have to have power, whether that power is human power or whether it's electrical power. But you have to have power to have the tools work. The equivalent is the same in humans. You need nutrients. You need functional cells. You need functional genetics. You need fuel and energy. You need hydrogen. You need oxygen. You need glucose. You need fats, etc. And you also need energy. So you need natural versus stimulated energy. Natural energy leaves things to chance. If you only rely on what your body can produce, we talked about entropy, your body's going to produce less and less over time. So natural is okay. There's nothing wrong with natural. But ideally, in order to maintain, to be ahead of, and to keep up at least with the losses of entropy, due to entropy, you have to be stimulated energy, which is better than chance. So fundamentally, PEMFs increase cellular, tissue, and organ energy, and therefore benefiting the entire body. So how do PEMFs work? So I mentioned the basic actions of PEMFs. These are some of the most rapid actions of PEMF therapies. So pain reduction is one of the keys. Circulation is one of the keys. Oxygenation is one of the keys. Anti-inflammatory takes a bit more time. Healing acceleration. Anticoagulant effects are very, very important. Reduced bruising, acupuncture stimulation, ATP, etc. So PEMF stimulates stem cells as well. That little girl's finger. All right. NASA found that PEMF therapy can increase neural stem cells by about 400%, along with about 150 growth factors. So stimulating stem cells by themselves doesn't repair. You need the growth factors to help with the repair. So PEMF therapy not only increases neural stem cells, but also increases about 150 growth factors, all related to regeneration. So PEMF therapies basically work through a principle of physics. They interact with the electric currents. They basically stimulate current development in the body, particularly in the cell, at the cell membrane. And once you stimulate current in the cell membrane, that current essentially reverberates through the whole cell, increasing cellular respiration, increasing immune modulation, decreasing coagulation, cyclic AMP and GMP, again, energy production. And that produces the 6 basic actions of PEMF therapy: anti-inflammatory, healing acceleration, improved perfusion, anti-edema, pain management, and reduced spasm of the muscles in the body. Now, this doesn't just stay at the local level. This cascades up into the whole body, essentially. So it begins to affect the nervous system, begins to affect the pituitary, cellular respiration in general, again, immune modulation. And so therefore, you end up with all these basic actions, not only at the local level, but now also at the systemic level. Now, one of the key ways that PEMF therapy works is because it's producing energy in the body. You want to catch the healing process or the damage or the reasons that you're doing PEMF therapy as early as possible before cell injury becomes irreversible. This is the Maginot Line. Okay, this is reversible cell injury. So this is cell function. As cell injury increases, all right, then cell function decreases. Eventually gets to a point where it's irreversible. At that point of decreased function, you then begin to see biochemical reactions, like testing, right? That shows up. Then if it continues, if that damage continues, the cell injury continues, the tissue injury continues, then you start to see ultrastructural, like super duper microscope changes. Eventually, you'll start to see it at like basic microscope changes. As it continues, then eventually you'll actually see it. If you see a wart, if you see blue fingers, if you see inflammation or infection, now you're talking about gross. And for most of human history, this is what we relied on. In the last 100 years or so, we've been able to get better and better and better at finding the injury process much earlier and intervening much earlier. So clearly, you can have more benefits at the biochemical level than you can at the microscopic level or gross levels. So you want to, again, if you're healing or working with cells at the reversible stage, we have about 100 trillion cells in our bodies. At any given time, every cell has about 1,000 to 2,000 biochemical processes at least per second. So if we're using magnetic field therapy on a regular basis, we're treating cells that are developing a problem before we are even aware that we have a problem. So that's where regular use of PEMF therapy becomes important, not just to treat a problem, but to keep up with entropy. And magnetic field therapy with a cell injury model, if you want to go geeky and read more about cell injury, you find out that cell injury causes certain structural changes, decreases ATP, causes mitochondrial damage, which goes along with the ATP decrease, changes in calcium entry, reactive oxygen species, membrane damage, protein misfolding, which can lead to genetic changes and genetic damage. So all of these are actions that PEMFs have. Every one of these aspects of cell injury are addressed by PEMF therapy. So again, PEMF therapy does local treatment, but then it cascades very rapidly to the whole body. So fundamentally, it increases cellular energy, tissue, and organ energy, which all helps to heal. So how does this work? What's the physics of this? I'm not going to go deep into the physics, and I don't think you want to, but basically, this is a basic understanding of what causes magnetic fields to work. So where there's electrical charge, where there's charge itself or electrical conductivity, there's a magnetic field. Electromagnetic go together, hand in glove. They're inseparable. So according to the laws of physics, Faraday's law in particular, the two aspects, electro and magnetic, are inseparable and interactive. So PEMFs work deeper than most other energy healing technology in the body because of the electromagnetic aspects, which we'll get to in a second. So this is an electromagnetic wave. This is the electrical components of current flowing through a wire, produces an electric field, and automatically perpendicular to that is the magnetic field. So where you have current flowing through a wire, you're producing a magnetic field automatically. This is a depiction of a magnetic field. So you can see as the red goes up, the blue goes across. So they're constantly, and as one increases in the amount, the other increases in the amount. As one decreases in the amount, the other decreases in the amount. So electromagnetic waves are inseparable. And that's the key to magnetic field therapy. So the body is transparent to a low frequency or DC magnetic field. In other words, a constant magnetic field. Nothing in the body stops, slows, or uses up a magnetic field. All right, it goes into the body. Magnetic field ignores the body, but the body does not ignore the magnetic field. So PEMFs pass through the body as if it wasn't even there. How far it passes through the body depends on the intensity. Ideally, you want an intensity that's strong enough that the magnetic field is going to go all the way through the body. And PEMFs are like the wind in the trees. You can't see the wind, but you know it's there by its actions. All right, so you know it's there by the actions that we described, the biologic actions, the physiologic actions. So the PEMF actions are mostly driven by the two laws of physics, Faraday's law and the inverse square law. And the inverse square law is related to the loss of the magnetic field over distance, with distance from the source. And that's important for light, heat, cold, sound, etc. All of those stimuli essentially drop off very rapidly based on the inverse square law to a great extent. So intensity matters. Because the magnetic field drops off very rapidly, intensity becomes very, very important. So based on Faraday's law, time varying alternating magnetic fields, pulse magnetic fields, induce an electric field in the tissue, in the wherever it's being broadcast to, whose magnitude is proportional to its rate of change. And we'll show you this in a second. So basically, what Faraday found is if you put a magnet through a coil of wire, and you have that wire, that coil, connected to a light bulb or a voltage meter, by moving that magnetic field back and forth in that wire, you will initiate current or charge, and that will then turn on the light bulb. So that was one of Faraday's most important discoveries. What that means is as you move a magnetic field into a body, you will then create current or charge in the body. Very important principle. And so that principle of induction of magnetic fields depends on the change in intensity. In other words, going from 0 up to a maximum intensity. And that requires time. So that basically is the change in time. So D is the scientific symbol for change, which is delta. So the change in intensity, which is B, and the change in time determine Faraday's law, determine the amount of charge that's able to be induced in the body. So this is a sample of a waveform from a particular device called the PEMF 120. Very rapid peak in that field and a gradual decay over distance, over time. So this is in Tesla. So a Tesla is 10,000 Gauss. So Tesla was, again, the brilliant mind behind the Tesla cars, obviously. What Tesla was the person who caused us to be able to have AC current in our lives and electricity, essentially. This is a sine wave. It's a much less energetic waveform. This is very energetic, produces very high levels of charge production in the body, enough to stimulate muscle contractions. Now, the body is electrolyte soup. So the body is not saline. The body is essentially electrolyte soup. And because it's electrolyte soup, it's basically full of ions. And ions induce and conduct charge. And PEMFs interact with natural charge existing in the body. Critical to what magnetic fields do in a body, which is, we think, as tissue, but it's not. It's full of molecules and it's full of electrical charges, electromagnetism. So PEMFs can stimulate the body to produce the amount of charge, healing, and other actions only to the extent the body's capable. Okay, the body has to do it. Magnetic field is just a stimulus. So the body cannot be overcharged, as can happen with electrical stim. Electrical stim, like with TENS machines and other kinds of external stimulation systems, can actually harm the body. So the body can become overcharged. When the body becomes overcharged, it becomes damaged. And you can use that principle in medicine to burn tissue that you don't want, like a wart or a cancer cell. So this is the inverse square law. So if you have a 1,000 Gauss magnetic field at 1 centimeter into the body, 1 centimeter away, okay, that's not very far. Within 1 centimeter, you've lost 75% of the magnetic field. So 1 millitesla is 10 Gauss. So 1,000 Gauss will have dropped down to 224 millitesla, 240 Gauss in 1 centimeter. So clearly, it keeps on dropping with distance. Becomes essentially negligible after a certain amount of distance. So that's a very important principle that a lot of people who do magnetic field therapies completely overlook and ignore. And most people who do magnetic field therapies, very frequently, they don't even know what the intensity of the magnetic field is that they're working with. So inflammation, this relies on that principle of the inverse square law. To control inflammation through the adenosine receptor, which is one of the ways magnetic fields reduce inflammation in the body, you need about 1.5 millitesla. You need about 15 Gauss to produce the optimal magnetic field stimulus to the adenosine receptor and therefore to affect inflammation. It plateaus after this. So after this, it doesn't produce any more benefit. However, fortunately, the magnetic field is largely ignored after this point. So it doesn't do anything. The body just ignores it. And that's a good thing. So that again relates to the fact that magnetic field therapy is very safe. So based on this calculation, if you want to treat the body, let's say you want to treat 2 inches into the body, okay, you're going to need to have a magnetic field of 540 Gauss to deliver 15 Gauss. Okay, so to deliver 15 Gauss at 2 inches into the body, you're going to need 500 Gauss. To deliver a 15 Gauss at 4 inches into the body, you're going to need 1,800 Gauss. All right, so therefore you don't get the benefit deeper into the body unless you have the right magnetic field intensity. Very critical. If you want to treat 8 inches into the body, you need 6,000 gauss. Again, these fields drop off extraordinarily rapidly. Now, this table is in my Supercharge Your Health book. The table is on my website as well. If you do a search on the homepage under for adenosine, you'll see the blog, and the table's in that blog. And the full explanation, the science behind this, is in the blog as well. Now, this was actually demonstrated, this intensity, the need for intensity was demonstrated in a study done on mouse paws, where it's a common tool used to assess the value of any kind of therapy to reduce inflammation. So this is an 8-hour study where they injected mice with carrageenan, which causes inflammation. So this is maximum inflammation at 4 hours, peaks at 4 hours, and that's without any treatment, essentially the control, what they call the vehicle. And the classic gold standard for reducing inflammation is basically steroids, dexamethasone. So at 4 hours, dexamethasone had the most reduction in PF therapy compared to the others. So you can see the spread of the different intensities, 1600, 1200, 800, 400 magnetic field intensities. So you can see at 4 hours, these two magnetic field intensities, so about 1600 and 1200, were close to dexamethasone. Okay, and the other ones, the much significantly weaker ones, were very weak in terms of producing effects on inflammation. So intensity matters, especially when it comes to inflammation. Now, in addition to all these things, we have to figure out what the body's doing. We have to understand the body, and we have to understand how the body's likely to respond to magnetic fields, because anything that we do to heal the body is going to deal with the levels of illness and is going to deal with the healing rates of the tissues. So I use this paradigm to look at levels of illness: energetic, physiologic, pathophysiologic, and pathologic. So in terms of a cold, you're tired and achy at the energetic, the runny nose at the physiologic, sneezing. Pathophysiologic, now you're coughing and you produce phlegm. And the pathologic stage, you have pneumonia and you have abscesses. Yeah, so you're pretty sick at that point. So at the energetic stage, treatment at the energetic stage can be done to produce results within minutes to hours. Physiologic stage, it could be take hours to days, a couple of days. Once it gets to pathology, it could take days to weeks. And with pathology, it could be weeks to years, or maybe even never. So you have to account for this in different tissues of the body. And then the tissues themselves heal at different rates. So not only depends on how bad the damage is in the tissues, but also depends on the tissue itself. Cornea heals in 24 hours. Gut cells take 72. Skin and muscle about 2 to 4 weeks, and bone can take up to 2 years or more. Nerves can take days to weeks. The brain maybe never. Tendons and ligaments are very, very hard to heal. So tears in tendons and ligaments is just very challenging in general. So now, to get the best results, you need the right equipment. So now that you see what PEMFs are, how they work, the intensity is critical for good results, and the body's responsiveness has to be considered in your expectations for the magnetic field or any other healing for that matter. So what kinds of devices should you not consider? Obviously, based on the adenosine receptor, if you just look at that alone, nothing less than 15 Gauss. So anything less than 15 Gauss is just not going to do very much for you at all in terms of reducing pain and keeping it gone in terms of healing and so on. So there are lots of magnetic devices that are sold that are less than 15 Gauss. Many people who have bought PEMF systems don't even know what the intensity, the peak intensity is of their system. Multi-level marketing companies don't want you to know. There are some companies that sell to doctors who also don't want you to know. They don't want to get into that discussion. But I'm showing you the science here that says that you need to have a minimum, an optimal level of 15 Gauss at the tissue. So basically, you probably shouldn't even think about anything less than 60 Gauss, for that matter, in order to get the best results. Remember, you need about 540 at 2 inches. You need about 1820 at 4 inches, and so on. So at 4 inches into the body, the optimal magnetic field intensity needed is about 1800 Gauss. So many people, including practitioners, are being marketed devices that are largely ineffective for their needs. Inadequate results lead to unhappy people and unhappy doctors because you made an investment in time, energy, and resources to be able to solve a problem. But if it's inadequate to the problem, then nobody's going to be happy with that. And unhappy people vote with their feet, whether it's leaving a doctor or needing to do multiple modalities and multiple technologies to help their problems. And often, as I mentioned, you do need multiple modalities to get the best results anyway. So there's a huge amount of conflicting information and many confusing choices. The internet is full of bad information. It neglects the science. It neglects Faraday's law. It neglects the inverse square law. It doesn't pay any attention to those at all. They just say they have these stories, and the stories are wonderful. People do feel better and they get better, but there are lots of limitations to those devices. So remember, intensity matters. Really, really, really matters. So when you're making a purchase of a device, what should you consider? The value equals the cost plus the benefit. So they have the benefit to the person and the benefit to a practitioner, if it's the practitioner that's delivering the treatment. All right. And the benefit to the person is based on intensity. The benefit to a practitioner is the practitioner has to get a return on the investment of the equipment. And there are the practical issues of delivering the therapy. And then obviously the results become really important. And people get good results, they come back and they continue their therapy until they get the full results they need. So consider that if you pay $6,000 for a 1 Gauss system, the multi-level marketing company out there sells a machine that's about 1 Gauss. If you even get told, but it's about $6,000. And then or you could pay for a higher intensity system for about $7,000 that will give you 4,000 Gauss, which is going to give you better results. If you want to know more about making sure that you're buying good equipment, you can go to PEMF Buyer's Guide. So it's Buyer's Guide on drpawluk.com. Just type in Buyer's Guide in the search area, and it'll pull you up to this very useful information to tell you how to watch out for what you're buying. So my recommended devices depends on the goals of treatment. You really should look at the whole person. You shouldn't just look at the splinter in the foot or the toe or the tendonitis in the shoulder. You should look at the whole person. What else is going on? I frequently have people calling me for a recommendation for a machine who have stage 4 cancer, and they want a machine for their shoulder, but they're ignoring the rest of the body. They're ignoring the rest of the problem they have, which is probably the most important problem they have, and not the one that they think that they should be treating, because at that point it's causing the most discomfort. So people are often disappointed in results because of the wrong device or the wrong treatment approach. And since it is often an investment, we need to think about magnetic field therapies, if you're buying them for yourself, as an investment. This is something you're going to be using for a long, long time, and you can use it for a lot of different problems, not just the one thing that you think you need it for. So you really should think long term, and you should think broader spectrum in terms of the whole body and in terms of entropy. So consider the time and the effort commitment. So there are companies that are selling devices that say all you need is 8 minutes a day. What repairs in the body in just 8 minutes? I think this is completely disingenuous. It's a marketing ploy to suck people in who think you can solve all problems with 8 minutes. Really? Anyway, so I most often recommend high intensity because, again, intensity matters. I most often recommend a magnetic sandwich because then you have the most efficient use of a PEMF system. You treat many areas of the body at the same time with adequate intensity to produce the best results and ultimately the least amount of treatment time. And that usually means that you need to have a dual applicator system. You might also want to consider getting a portable battery-operated home system that allows you to have more flexibility and you can go about your business while you're doing magnetic field therapy. I just had a dental procedure today, and I'm using a portable battery-operated home system for my face area for the dental problem. So, and they're available on drpawluk.com. I'm not going to go through that table. There's a series of tables in Supercharge Your Health, and there's also a series of tables in Dr. Pawluk, and in Power Tools for Health. This table happens to come from Supercharge Your Health. So we give the device, give you a picture, show you the price, and show you the magnetic field intensity. So this helps you to do that. We also have a product comparison page on drpawluk.com. And that product comparison page gives you all those machines and also gives you the price and the intensity. All right. So now, for you to know how to best have a PEMF system, you probably may want to consider, depending on how complicated your problems are, getting a consultation with one of our doctors. We have myself, an acupuncturist, and a chiropractor who do consultations. And you can go to the product comparison page to find, again, an easily accessible product, but it's on the website. It's going to be there all the time. Or you can go to the store and look up the specific products that we carry on drpawluk.com. Now, the reason I carry devices on drpawluk.com is because I used to give people recommendations for devices. And then they would go to the company, buy their machine, and then the company doesn't tell them how to use it. So then they would come back and say, how do I use this? So and people would often make the wrong choices as well. So I thought in order to be able to properly support people through drpawluk.com, we need to test the devices, we need to provide recommendations, and provide recommendations for how to use them properly to get the best results. There's a good video here, how to choose and use the PEMF system. It's on the apply for a free consultation page. That's a very useful video. It's a good introduction to think about how to select magnetic field therapy. Now, the devices I recommend the most often are the PARMED's flash systems. They're high intensity. They can contract muscles, in other words, strong enough to cause muscle contractions. They're very efficient, so they produce better results faster. They're solid state, which means that they don't need maintenance. There are high intensity PEMF systems that have a capacitive discharge, and those discharge systems need maintenance. They're very good, but they require maintenance, and sometimes they can be very awkward to use, and they can be very heavy. So this is pictures of the flash machines, and again, they're on drpawluk.com. Multi-flash, premium flash, and ultra flash. The ultra flash is the dual applicator system, which gives you the magnetic sandwich. The premium flash goes up to 7,000 Gauss. Oh, I'm sorry, these numbers are backwards. The multi-flash is 4,000, and the premium and the ultra flash is 10,000. So each applicator in the ultra flash goes up to 10,000 Gauss. All right, so basically you're going to have to pay for the extra voltage, the extra magnetic field intensity. This is a picture showing you the intensities of the magnetic devices, the pads, the different applicators with these systems. So again, the highest intensity on the multi-flash is 4,000, premium flash 7,000, and the ultra flash 10,000. So each applicator, each channel in the ultra flash will deliver up to 10,000 Gauss. So when do you add home treatment? That's a matter of clinical judgment. I usually recommend home treatment for people because most people have chronic problems, need magnetic field therapy. Therefore, you need something that you're going to be able to use every day, possibly multiple times a day for years. Some problems don't heal, they don't get better, and therefore what you have to do is you have to just at least maintain your benefits. And when you stop doing treatment, you don't stop maintaining. Just the same thing happens with ibuprofen, and the same thing happens with steroids and also opioids. They just provide symptomatic benefit. They don't heal. So therefore, you can never really stop using them if you haven't healed the problem. There's often a need for nighttime use. I use magnetic field therapies every night to help with sleep, but people often need it for bad knees or bad hips or a bad back. So if you're getting treatment at a doctor's office, you are not going to get sustainable benefits because you don't treat often enough. You probably don't treat for a long enough period of time while you're there as well. So when you've got some benefit from doctors' treatments, you may have to consider getting a treatment system for yourself at home. And then it's a question of getting the right intensity. Doctors often have very high intensity systems that are very expensive. There's one out there that I see people with regularly that's about $35,000. But ultimately, what we offer people will produce the same results as the very expensive systems that are designed for clinical use. So to order any of these PARMED system, or for that matter, any magnetic systems at all on our websites, you could go to drpawluk.com, or you can call that number, 866-455-7688. I think you'll be able to review this presentation again down the road. So if you haven't copied it, you'll be able to see it again. So now we're offering a bonus here for people who are listening today and watching. So orders made in the next 30 days will qualify for a bonus. So orders made of a flash system for the next 30 days will be able to get a $400 discount. And we do provide consultations. In case you don't want a discount, in case you don't know what to get, then we do offer a free personalized individual professional consultation with one of our medical team. Now, this resource is only for people who are open to purchasing a higher intensity PEMF system. So if you're only interested in a $50 machine or a $300 machine, you really don't need a consultation. Or you can just contact us at drpawluk.com, info@drpawluk.com, and get a free discussion with one of our team. So webinar attendees then will get a $400 discount on the total purchase price of a PowerMed's flash system, multi, premium, or ultra. They have to be purchased within the next 30 days. Now, the devices are already significantly discounted, so we're giving you an additional discount of $400. We worked with the manufacturer to keep the prices down so that we can make high-intensity devices more affordable for the non-clinician and even the clinician users. So to claim the bonus, call that number again, 866-455-7688. And if you want to order online, which you can do, you can just put in the coupon code SORIN. If you call the 866 number, tell them that you attended the Shealy-Sorin Functional Medicine webinar today, and they'll log that and make sure that you get your discount. And so this coupon code is valid for 30 days. It ends midnight on March 9th. Now, if you want more resources, lots of learning, you can get my books. I do strongly recommend, if you're going to make an investment in a $6,000 system, you may want to consider spending $29 to buy a book that helps to explain a lot more about PEMF therapies and how to use them. Supercharge Your Health book has about 80 different health conditions and actually gives you a specific protocol for each condition. And you don't get that with Power Tools. So there's more information here. If you go to apply for a consultation, you'll see these links for, again, more education and more learning for yourself. All right, so thanks for joining the webinar. I'm done. That was a rapid fire presentation, so I guess I can stop this.
Doc, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Blew me away. Thank you. As always, wealth of information, incredible, amazing, Dr. Pawluk. Thank you so much. Bill? We do have a couple of questions, so let's just jump in, and I have a few here. Actually, I'm not sure if we can have that on the screen here. Otherwise, I can look on my phone. Not the best path, of course, but we'll do what we got to do here. So, question number one for Dr. Pawluk. Let's look on the screen. All right, Matt, can you get us up on there and show us the first question, and then go from there?
Well, the first question, I'll take the first question that I see on the screen here.
Oh, okay. Hold on. I think.
If you want,
well, if you can see. Got you. Okay, if you can see it, go ahead, Doc. I think this one is for you. Yep.
All right. Do you set the same settings for dogs? I tell people, when you buy a PEMF system, you don't own it. The house owns it, including your spouse, if you're willing to let your spouse use it, your partner, or your dog, your cat, or your plants. So the settings for dogs tend to be lower. Nobody should go to the maximum intensity and the maximum time right away anyway. In the Supercharge Your Health book, I have an appendix on going low and slow. On drpawluk.com, there's a blog about going low and slow. So in other words, you have to figure out what the body will tolerate. Magnetic field therapy is demanding work from the body. The body has to do the work. So PEMFs are essentially demanding that the body do work. And like exercise or running, you don't get off the couch and run a marathon tomorrow. You have to train. And you may have to train for a long time, or you may have to train for a short time, depending on what your condition is. So dogs are like starting low and slow. Animals gravitate to the therapy. Just the other day, I was talking to a woman who had a dual mat system, and the dog would lay on her chest while getting therapy. And she was cranking it up, so the dog tolerated it. So basically, it's a matter of tolerance as well. And if you're doing it and they come sit next to you, then they know when they've had enough. They'll just walk away. And right? If you're trying to set it up on purpose, then you go low and slow, and you see what the animal tolerates, and then you see the results and the benefits. And you can eventually go to the maximum intensity and the maximum time, just like you would with a human. Children and animals are similar in their levels of sensitivity. So again, with children especially, you should go low and slow too.
Perfect. I fully agree. Actually, my cousin is having one of my cousins. I have a picture. Maybe I'll put it up on social media at some point. Her puppy, who is older, her name is Charlie, cute little dog, is having a recovering from surgery, and she literally the PEMF unit is on the pup, or 24/7, and loves it, loves it, loves it, loves it. I mean, it's going well. So.
It's hard
It's
to
powerful.
overdose. It's very hard to overdose.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, Doc, second question. This is about the Shealy-Sorin unit. I think you came across that. We had we discussed that at some point, including there was a PEMF summit that you and I did, and I absolutely enjoyed that conversation. Uh, Speaking of the intensity, gauze-wise, but also distinctions between the various things. For example, the Shealy-Sorin PEMF contains three aspects. One is a sweep. The second is a gamma mode, which designed for the brain optimization in mental health support, addiction, but just literally optimizing the brain, the control center. And then there's the delta, which is the lower frequency of 0 to 3 cycles per second. And I'm trying to remember technically what those values are. I mean, I could look it up, but I kind of hate to not give an answer.
Oh, the intensity values?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're relatively low. And I think Dr. Shealy probably developed it from the perspective of treating the brain and being very careful. We've since learned, and since the FDA approved high-intensity devices for treatment-resistant depression, which are now being extensively researched for basically all kinds of neurological problems. I actually did a review paper on the use of high-intensity PEMF devices for TBI, brain injury, concussion. And most of the research actually that shows significant benefit, most of that research actually is using high-intensity devices. So low-intensity devices can entrain the brain. But the more brain chatter you have and the more inflammation you have in the brain, it may make it harder for a lower intensity system to work adequately quickly. Now, it will over time. So if you're just using it for meditation, or if you're using it for relaxation or to de-stress, it can be adequate. When you're using it for Parkinson's or MS, especially for healing purposes, it's probably not going to work as well. You're going to need higher intensity.
The one thing that I've noticed, and I'll comment on this actually, and this is interesting, is some people develop in the office, in the clinical setting, when I put it on. Sometimes some people focus initially, boom, I'm seeing something, feeling something, very sensitive. There's a range in human responses. I'll just give my personal observation here. And some people, it takes 2 to 4 weeks to feel the effect. And it's an interesting science. It's not exactly precise, and I don't want to give anyone any specific expectations when it comes to this kind of things, because it is it is your own internal body milieu as well that is controlling it as well. If you're hydrated, whether you're hydrated, whether you're just inflamed, it's if you're metabolically aligned, if the gut biome is okay, lots of different factors. But thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, we know, for example, with electrical stimulation, or when you're doing, let's say, cardiac stimulation,
mm-hmm.
the threshold becomes important. And so you kind of have to know what the threshold is of the problem that you're treating. And sometimes we don't know what that threshold is, because
mm-hmm.
if 40 Gauss delivers an adequate level of stimulation for what you're needing, then that's it. You don't need anything else. But if you try it and it's not working, then there's a good chance that you may need to step up to a higher intensity. Or what often happens is that if you have very low intensities, you may still get similar benefits by doing it for a longer period of time. So that slide I showed you with a 1.5 millitesla, the optimal was 1.5, but you could see that there was a tail going down. So you could still get benefits at the lower end of that curve, but it's just going to take longer and more treatment time actually to see the benefits.
Roger that. All right, so let's see. I think there was a next question is, how do I use PEMF to help quit smoking? Now that's an interesting one. I know you're smiling right there, Doc. My first question is, why do people smoke? What's the reason for the smoking to begin with? And let's address it from the root cause. And go ahead, Doc. Yeah.
Listen, wait a minute. You're going off the reservation here. You're thinking too holistically.
Gotcha.
As I mentioned, if you have a splinter, don't think about the fact that you're smoking too. So yes, yes. Why? I think dealing with the cause and the setting becomes very important. And so, quitting smoking, probably the most important thing about quitting smoking is to make the decision to quit. Right? If you don't make that decision, if you're doing something because the prison system tells you, or the legal system tells you to quit, or because you've got lung cancer, well, but if you have lung cancer, you're kind of late to the game anyway. But if you decide to make that decision, if you make the decision, you can quit now. You don't need PEMF therapy to quit. So the role of PEMF therapy then in the setting of addictions, including smoking, is to assist you with the withdrawal. Because it helps to tune the brain, so it makes the brain a little more quiet and a little more relaxed and less irritable from the withdrawal effects. So in my mind, that's where the addiction, where the magnetic field therapy comes in. But if you're doing magnetic field therapy on a regular basis, like with the Shealy machine, then if you're doing it regularly, whether you're doing it for smoking or not, or whether you're doing it for anxiety or not, it's still going to have that benefit.
Exactly. My take on this is this, Doc, and please feel free to weigh in on this, because I mean you're a wealth of knowledge on holism, but also PEMFs. My concept on the holistic perspective for smoking is that there is a need. There is a metabolic, there is a neuroendocrine, there is a hormonal, and there is a brain chemical dysfunction: dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, all kinds of things. So now you have to support the brain. You have to take care of the brain, and you have to make sure that it's physiologically supported by certain supplements, certain nutrients, lifestyle. We haven't talked about stress management, huge, essential. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. I mean, you don't address that, how can you fix anything? It's difficult. This is where Dr. Shealy came up with biogenics, but there's so many ways to get this, so many ways up the mountain. Just make sure you choose one. But the bottom line is the support from the electromagnetic, specifically magnetic, for the brain can give you tools just like all the other things, but nothing happens until decision is made. Would you agree? Nothing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're self-reinforcing. So if you're using the supplements, and I had that slide on, you can't build a house without bricks and mortar. You can't repair a bone unless you have the nutrients to help the bone to fix itself. So you're telling the body, fix yourself, and the body will do that. It's got the charge now to do that, but it still needs the calcium. It still needs the boron, still needs the manganese, right? You still need the basic.
Exactly.
So when you're talking about addictions, you still have to do the self-talk. You still have to do the relaxation. And combining these things together makes everything work better. It's not 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 + 1 can equal 10 or 1,000.
Exactly. And I want to emphasize very strongly, and again, I don't want to get into, I don't want to make a statement that's not true, but as good as PEMF is, and you've done a fantastic, beautiful, amazing presentation, and I'm sure you could talk about it for many more hours if we have the time. The PEMF is an adjunct. It's a tool. It's not a silver bullet, and I want people to understand that. And this is what I say with regard to our device. I mean, there's a few questions I can talk about. And there's a question here. We purchased the Shealy-Sorin PEMF and we love it. That is fantastic. I think as far as the question, can you talk about the frequency and the ghost? So 3 different modalities, and I'll address those briefly. But the concept is certainly use over time has demonstrated far greater superior benefits than just expecting results within minutes or seconds. So give it time, folks. Give it time. There is no reason not to enjoy the benefit. Now, does the gamma mode help with more than just depression? Ooh, that's a good one. Gamma. Gamma is a frequency of generally acknowledged as 40 cycles per second. Now, it's not just 40 cycles per second. There's a whole range as to what gamma is. in our experience, gamma has worked in the clinical research. We've done study on addiction. Literally, people with ankle bracelets and just really terrible lives. And then, well, what's the addiction numbers generally? 17% at some of the best rehab centers. How good is that? Well, we got a over 90+% on this, but again, I don't think it was just the device. I think it was also the intention. It was also the fact that people were interested in changing their lives. Nobody, again, nobody just benefits from just from a thing or a tool. And I do believe that it helps the brain, especially in there, to just get into the optimal zone. Gamma is, to me, in the zone. It's the meditators. It's the transcendental meditators. It's people in the caves. What's your experience with gamma, Doc?
It's basically the same thing. I think gamma, they describe gamma as a frequency that goes from the front to the back, from the back to the front of the brain. So gamma is an integrating frequency. So if you have auditory input, if you have thought input, if you have tactile input, sensory input, that all that has to be integrated into the brain and goes to the various sensory receptor areas of the brain. So it has to become integrated. So then basically what you're doing is you're doing better brain balancing in general by doing gamma. So gamma is a higher frequency. So for example, we were talking about delta and the fact that you need delta for sleep at certain phases of sleep. So magnetic field therapy can do entrainment. So what the Shealy machine is doing is mostly through an entrainment effect, but it is doing a PEMF effect as well, to the extent that the intensity allows the magnetic field go, how deep it goes into the brain. So the entrainment effect is the key. And if you keep doing it often enough, you begin to learn the state that you feel with it. And when you learn the state that you're feeling with it, you anticipate that state. So basically, you're already producing that state before you even start doing the Shealy machine. So then basically, it's going to keep amplifying the effects of that brain entrainment.
Brilliant. One of my foundations. I know we're going beyond the hour, but if you're good, Doc, we'll stay on because this is fascinating. I love this topic. I started out initially when I was let's kind of go back a bit to history. So, 2007, I was diagnosed with a colon cancer stage 3 plus, I should say, and I was given 2 years to live, literally. So from 2000 to 2007 to 2009. That's when I started waking up who I was. I grew up in a holistic family. My grandmother was a pediatric cardiologist back in this former Soviet. It was terrible to be a woman in medicine, and it was terrible to be in medicine at that time. There was no resources, so you had to think outside the box. So this is what woke me up, that experience on the spot. And I've had several others, and I think that you and I have shared a few experiences between ourselves. You've got a few stories of your own, Doc. So the interesting thing is, and I hope I didn't lose the concept of where I was going, but there's just so many things to talk about. Go ahead, please. Entrainment. This is one of my foundations. Audio visual entrainment. That's how I started. Our first company with Dr. Brian Daly. He was on the program on the previous week. Talks about how do you get the brain, the central nervous system, the control center. Literally, what else is there more important than the control center? You can have the hugest body. You can have a bodybuilder. You can have the most healthy vascular system. Give it the wrong direction, give it the wrong control center, give it the wrong motivation, you're going to ruin it. And how fast? Feel free to jump in, please. I mean, but to me, that is the key.
Well, and then one of the things we use magnetic field therapy. I use magnetic field therapy as audio magnetic entrainment, right, as opposed to visual or purely auditory. So what I found over time, the value of PEMFs over other forms of audio visual entrainment in particular, is that the magnetic field does healing too. Even though you're aiming for entrainment, even though that's your goal to get the entrainment benefits of that, it's also doing some level of brain healing and stimulating other processes in the brain that are not just purely biochemical. Right? So you're adding to the audiovisual component of the entrainment. So now it's called audio magnetic entrainment.
Wonderful. But and then combined with all the benefits that you outlined in the slides, and just a lot of information, but ATP production, cellular regeneration, healing, tissue, vascular recovery, musculoskeletal, central nervous system. Literally, is there an organ system that's not affected? I would say it's a cellular recharger.
Unless it's a pipe organ.
Right.
I don't think we can help a pipe organ.
No, I don't think so either, Doc. Let's see if there's anything else that came in here, or any other questions. But I do want to also say thank you to our friends and sponsors as well. We have several folks here in Springfield that I want to say I'm grateful to. Spring Valley, wonderful folks. They carry great B complex, youth formula, lots of different things, and magnesium lotion, nutrients, literally, and then lots of other different things. And it's one of the best customer service available. Another thing that I'd like to mention is if you're not getting your veggies, because it's not just about one aspect of life. Holism is everything. Make sure that tart cherry juice concentrate, 2 teaspoons, or you can take sometimes 1, depending on your nutrient status. But Dr. Shealy has been doing it for years. I started myself. Delicious. Well, tastes vary, but healthy, anti-inflammatory, lots of benefits, and as a just all-around closure, I just want to say thank you to my mentor, to my guru, and Dr. Pawluk, Bill. I thank you for an enlightening, beautiful conversation. I would love to have you back with us, and we can talk about PEMFs, but we can also talk about a multitude of other topics. So would love to have you.
Range far and wide. Thank you.
Yep. And I think Matt will provide the information, or there'll be information for how to how to find Dr. Pawluk, further information on how to get in touch with us, and blessings. And I think we are good. See you next week.